If the SAT math section were a video game, most students are just mashing buttons and hoping for the best. They jump right into that final boss fight without ever looking at the controls. But this is a game with rules, with patterns, and yeah, a hidden instruction manual. Today, we're going to read that manual.
And Diff Explainer? Well, this is your guide to those controls. Because once you know them, the test stops feeling like some random, terrifying monster, and it starts feeling, well, predictable. So let's get you ready to actually play the game.
All right, so what's the very first control you need to master? It's understanding what this game is really about. The College Board has a bit of a hidden agenda, and trust me, it's not what you've been learning in your high school math class. Okay, look at this. This right here reframes the entire test. The SAT is not a measure of how many formulas you crammed into your brain. No, it's testing something totally different. Can you look at a question and actually interpret what's being asked? Can you spot the shortcut instead of taking the long, winding road? And maybe most importantly, can you do all of that while the clock is ticking and the pressure's on? That's the real test. This is it. This is the one question that is behind every single problem on the test. It's a game of comprehension, not calculation. The second you realize this, you start looking at the questions in a completely new light. So now that you get the game's objective, let's talk about the level design. The digital SAT has this unique structure, you could call it the adaptive gauntlet, and it literally reacts to how you play. On the surface, it looks pretty simple, right? 2 modules, 22 questions each, 35 minutes each, and hey, you get a calculator for every single question. But there's a huge twist hidden in how you get from Module 1 to Module 2. And here's that twist. The test is adaptive. How well you do on that first module directly determines how hard your second module is going to be. If you crush Module 1, you unlock a harder Module 2, which gives you access to the highest scores. But if you struggle, the test gives you an easier second module, and it puts a cap on how high your score can possibly go. So here's the bottom line. Module 1 is the gatekeeper to a great score. You can't just slack off at the beginning and think, oh, I'll make it up later. Nope. By the time you start Module 2, the test has already decided your scoring potential. This is why top scorers treat that first module like it's everything. Okay, you understand the level design. Now it's time to meet the enemies, because the questions and the answer choices on this test, they aren't just sitting there innocently, oh no. They are designed as traps. The people who make this test, they are absolute masters of disguise. They'll take a super simple concept and wrap it up in long, confusing sentences. They'll throw in extra numbers just to see if you're paying attention. And why do they do this? To make you panic, to make you overthink, to trick you into making a dumb mistake on an easy question. Most points are lost, not because the math is hard, but because someone rushed and misread one tiny word. So you have 35 minutes for 22 questions. If you do the math, that's about 1 minute and 35 seconds for each question. And a lot of students see that number and they think, okay, that's my target for every single problem. But thinking that way is a massive trap. You are absolutely not supposed to spend the same amount of time on every question. People who get high scores know this. They might spend 20 seconds on one question and maybe 2 full minutes on another. Their entire strategy is about efficiency. We call this strategy profitable problem solving. It just means you go hunting for the quick, easy points first. If a question feels like you've hit a brick wall after 30 seconds, you don't fight it. You flag it and you move on. You solve without ego. You rack up the easy points, then you circle back for the tougher fights later. And it's not just the questions that are traps. The wrong answer choices they're like psychological weapons. They're not just random numbers. Each one is the exact answer you'd get if you made a really common mistake. Like, you solved for X, but the question asked for Y, or you forgot a negative sign. So if you get an answer and see it right there as an option, it's probably a good idea to pause and just double check your work. Okay, so you know how to avoid the traps. Let's talk about your power-ups. The test actually gives you some incredibly powerful tools, and knowing when and how to use them is the key to winning this whole thing. First up, the calculator. So yeah, you can use it on every question, but that really doesn't mean you should. It's a lifesaver for messy decimals, or for checking your work, but it becomes a time-wasting crutch if you reach for it on simple equations or problems that are actually designed to be solved with logic. The mantra here is simple. Think first, calculate second. But there is one tool that is so powerful, it almost feels like cheating.
And I'm talking about the built-in Desmos graphing calculator. It is this dynamic, visual tool that lets you graph functions in seconds, and it can completely change how you approach the test. And this quote is 100% true. The test makers expect top scorers to use Desmos. Not using it is a massive, self-imposed disadvantage. You're basically choosing to fight with one hand tied behind your back. And here's why it's so powerful. I mean, look at these superpowers. You can turn a really complex algebra problem about a system of equations into a simple visual task. Just graph the lines and see where they cross. It lets you completely bypass all that tedious calculation and see the answer right there on the screen.
Your final power-up is smart guessing. There is zero penalty for wrong answers on the SAT. That means leaving a question blank is literally the worst thing you can do. Even if you can just eliminate one or two answers that are obviously wrong and make an educated guess, you are playing the odds and giving yourself a free shot at points you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay, you've got the rules, you know the traps, you've got your tools. The last piece of the puzzle is honestly the most important one: having the right mindset. Listen to this. You can miss several questions and still get an absolutely elite score. The test rewards consistency and accuracy on the easy and medium stuff way more than it rewards struggling with the hardest questions. Most people's scores drop because of simple, avoidable mistakes they made under pressure, not because they lacked some genius-level math knowledge. And that really brings us to the core idea of all of this. Success on the SAT math section comes from understanding its structure, recognizing its traps, and using the tools it gives you. It's about playing the game by its own rules, not trying to fight against it with brute force. Once you see the patterns, the test stops feeling random and it starts feeling, well, scripted. It asks the same kinds of questions, it sets the same kinds of traps, and it rewards the same strategies over and over again. So the only question left is, are you ready to learn your lines?